This is the Fujifilm X100VI, and I just found out that apparently it can take infrared photos, which is pretty crazy. I've been going down a bit of an infrared photography rabbit hole the past few days, and this is just way too cool not to make a video about. So, how does this work? Well, let's take a quick look at our good old pal, the electromagnetic spectrum, who we've all seen before in school and subsequently forgot again about by lunch. This is the visible spectrum. These are all the wavelengths of photons that us humans can see. Depending on the wavelength, that light is a different color. For example, a wavelength of 450 nanometers is blue. All cameras are built to take photos in this visible range. They are built to capture the world the way us humans see it. But what if we took photos using the light we cannot see? When we look at waves that are longer than the visible spectrum, we get into infrared territory. Interestingly enough, the sensors in pretty much all digital cameras, yours as well, can see near infrared and infrared light, but manufacturers install a filter in front of the sensor to restrict the light that ends up in your photo, so it looks the way that you saw the scene in real life. And here's where it gets really interesting, because while going down a bit of a rabbit hole about all this sometime around 2 AM on a Tuesday, I read that apparently on most Fujifilm cameras, that infrared blocking filter still lets through a surprising amount of infrared light. Usually, when people want to do infrared photography, they'll give a camera to a professional who then disassembles it and removes that IR blocking filter from the sensor. But that means you need to pay for an extra camera that you then get converted, and then pay somebody to actually do the conversion. That's just a lot of paying to be doing when you're a university student like me. So when I read that piece of information about Fujifilm cameras, I got beyond excited because I've been wanting to experiment with infrared photography for years. I quickly did the thing I do best and ordered some photography gear at 2:30 AM. This is what I got: a Hoya R72 lens filter and an adapter ring to attach it to my X100VI. I'm gonna leave links for both of those in the description down below. This filter blocks out all light below 720 nanometers and only lets infrared light pass. This allows us to get rid of all the visible light and only capture that little bit of infrared light that gets through to the sensor. And actually, it works. I was seriously blown away that I was able to get such awesome looking infrared images out of a completely unmodified X100VI, but there definitely are some asterisks to this whole process. First, we're basically blocking out all light that is not infrared light with the R72 filter, and that filter in front of the sensor is trying to block out all light that is not visible light, so we end up with not a lot of light actually being able to reach the sensor. That means we really need to crank the exposure for this to work. These photos were taken in broad daylight on a bright summer afternoon, and I had to open up my aperture all the way to f2, up the ISO to between 400 and 1600, and still I had to use a super slow shutter speed between 1/10 and a quarter of a second. Usually you would have to use a tripod with a shutter speed that slow, but I have a weird aversion to ever using a tripod unless I absolutely have to. And the stabilized sensor in the X100VI really came in clutch for this, allowing me to take these photos handheld without having to set the ISO insanely high. Another big factor for getting these types of images is having a sunny day with relatively clear skies. That'll really help with getting that pink foliage and cyan sky for the ideal cotton candy color scheme. The other very big asterisk with these images is that getting these results is associated with quite a bit of post-processing, because this is what the raw images straight out of camera look like. I know it looks like everybody's favorite character from the DC universe, Condiment King, had his way with these images, but I'm now gonna show you what you need to do to turn these ugly raws into those dreamy cotton candy photos. But first, a message from today's sponsor. It's you! I only have sponsors for my videos every now and then, and if you've been enjoying the visible light that has been hitting your eyeballs while watching this video, why don't you go check out my Lightroom preset packs? Not only will you help me keep this channel running, but also get some super nice presets for your photos, like my Disposable Vibes pack, black or my legendary analog vibes presets. I'll leave a heavy discount for you in the description down below. Okay, let's get to editing these infrared images. First, you need to go to the Rob Shee photography website. I'm gonna leave a link in the description for you. There you need to download the free infrared profile pack. There's installation instructions on the website. Basically, you just need to copy the two profiles that match your camera model from the big folder you downloaded to a specific Lightroom folder. These profiles are crucial for processing infrared images because they are used to correctly set your white balance. After restarting Lightroom, you should be able to see the two profiles. Let's apply the first one. You might be wondering which one to choose, and it just depends on what camera and filter combination you're using, so one or the other might work better for you. With the profile selected, we are now going to set the white balance using this thingy here and clicking on one of the clouds in the image. Now, right-click the image and select Edit in Photoshop. Once Photoshop has decided it wants to play ball and actually opens up, we can now swap the red and blue color channels. We'll do this by going to the Adjustments tab on the right and select the channel mixer. Now, let's mix some channels like it's a cocktail party and you're staring at the bottom of your third Cosmopolitan of the evening. In the red channel, we're going to set red to 0 and blue to 100. Then go to the blue channel and do the opposite, which usually involves seeing all the cocktails you drank a second time. Alternatively, you can also just set the blue slider to 0 and the red one to 100 here. You can see we're already getting there. I'm just gonna hit Command S here to save and go back to Lightroom to our now channel swapped image. All you need to do now is just add some red, orange and blue saturation to make those colors pop. And from here you can just edit it like you would edit any image. Add some contrast, fight the weird snake sitting in the tone curve, and pro tip, for that dreamy look I would definitely bump the exposure and add some negative clarity. I just quickly made a Lightroom preset that speeds this process up for me. I'll also leave a free download link for that in the description. Another thing I noticed is that around the corners and edges the red can get quite strong. I think that's just a byproduct of the filter we're using and maybe of how the X100VI's lens reacts to infrared light. I found that just adding some vignetting can really help combat that. And that's it already. It might sound like a tedious process, but it's actually really quick once you get the hang of it.
That's what she said.
Honestly, I did have some mixed results, and I think that has to do with the white balance. Getting the white balance right before swapping the channels in Photoshop is super important. You might be thinking, well, why am I going through all this effort of taking infrared photos when in the end I'm doing a lot of editing anyways? And honestly, that's a fair question. But keep in mind that infrared is not visible light. When you're doing this color infrared stuff, it's by definition always just a creative interpretation. And it's just super fun to experiment with. I only showed you swapping the red and blue channel, but there's a bunch of other fun stuff you can do to get different looks. Okay, that's it from me today. Go take some infrared photos. Bye bye.